Hello everyone, my name is Miss Cahoon from the Huntley Branch Library. Today we are celebrating Literacy Day under the theme Literacy, Teaching and Learning in the COVID-19 Crisis and Beyond. Today I'll be reading from the book entitled Anansi and Fools, written by Al Campbell. The title of the story that I'll be reading is Anansi and No Argument Town. Quock Anansi the Spider-Man once left his hometown and traveled to faraway lands. When he grew tired, he stopped in a town called No Argument Town. The main law of No Argument Town was pretty simple. There, no one was allowed to argue at all, and especially to disagree with whatever position was taken by the rich and powerful rulers. Even small children were not allowed to argue among themselves. And Anansi, like all the other strangers, was warned that the penalty for entering into arguing with anyone was death. Anansi was tired, so he decided to have a rest in No Argument Town. The next day, a huge festival was held. As was the tradition, the rich and powerful gathered in the town square to celebrate the yam harvest. Everyone was singing and dancing and having a good time. Soon, the time came for the roasting of the yams. The yams were piled high onto a coal fire. Then, suddenly, to everyone's surprise, Anansi spoke. "Why?" asked Anansi. "Were the yams being piled before they were roasted? And why were the big people at the head of the lines to eat before the children?" "What an abomination!" The whole place broke out in an uproar. The unheard of had happened. Well, no matter how justified Anansi's questions were, the law of the land had to take its course. Right there and then, the very important persons arrested and charged the little Spider-Man with arguing at variance, contentious quarrelsome queries, and loquacious loggerheadedness. And right there and then, Anansi was summarily tried and sentenced. Yes, poor Anansi was sentenced to hang by the neck until he was dead. When the verdict was read, Anansi rubbed his neck and swallowed his saliva. Anansi was to be executed on the following morning in an area that was across the river. That night, Anansi didn't sleep. Instead, he was dancing and singing merrily, as if this was the eve of his wedding. "The execution is tomorrow," said the people. "How can he be so happy? Maybe he is crazy." The following morning, Anansi was handcuffed, put in shackles, and led by the executioner to the gallows. Along the way to the gallows, a few court officials and guards joined the group. When the procession was crossing the river, Anansi suddenly cried out, "A shark! A shark is biting my toes!" At this, the executioner who was carrying him looked back at the Spider-Man and screamed, "How can a shark bite you?" he asked in disgust. "Especially when you are riding on my shoulders, and I am at least 5 feet above the water's surface." "Yes," said a court official. "How's that possible when sharks are in the sea, not in this river? How can a shark bite you?" "Ha ha!" shouted Anansi. "You, Mr. Executioner, and you, Mr. Court Official, you have broken the town's prohibited practice by arguing. "Ah, what is this? What shall happen to the two of you?" Of course, Anansi was right. And so the other court officials in the group were left with no option than to order that Anansi be returned to the court for a retrial. As soon as they got to the courthouse, Anansi shouted again, "The shark that bit me in the river is now sitting there behind the judge." The judge jumped out of his seat saying, Where? "There," Anansi said, as he pointed behind the judge. "And what's more, the impertinent shark is laughing at you." Listen to him giggle. Of course, the judge lost his temper, for there was no such shark in the courthouse. When Anansi would not stop at all his ridiculous nonsense, the judge shouted back at him angrily, "I warn you, puny Spider-Man, you must halt, cease and desist from causing any more trouble." Whereupon, Anansi promptly accused the judge of arguing, which was against the law that he and his powerful colleagues had laid down. That was it. The choice now was for the judge to either sentence himself to death or to repeal the law. And of course, you know what happened. Anansi won the day. He was set free. The foolish law was abandoned. From that day, the citizens of No Argument Town got back their right to argue whenever they wished. The end. Thank you for listening. Have a lovely day.